I think it's about Phil Foden's reinvention. The one thing that I know in football, in other sports and in life, every person goes through a reinvention. A lot of players have gone through a season of reinvention and they get stuck in it. If you look at the best players in the world, they've all gone through a season of growth. Journeys are built, no matter how talented you may be. So what's going on, my ballers, athletes and people? It's me, Lamar Aaron, and welcome to another episode of Ball and Live. This is episode 6, and this show is all about football cultural conversations to help you ball and live in this football life. Now, for those who don't know me, I've played for West Ham United. I went through the academy system. I've lived it. I've experienced it. And this show is all about me packaging my knowledge and giving it to you. And on this episode, we are going to be talking about Phil Foden and his reinvention. A lot of people saying he's back, but I don't think it's about he's back. I think he had to go through a season of reinvention to be able to become the next level of himself. The next conversation we're going to be talking about is Xavi Simons and how he's made his debut, but more importantly, how he oozes discipline and the journey of a footballer. And I think it's something that a lot of players can study. But last but not least, if you guys have seen social media, you'll see this thing called the Great Lock-in. And I started to think about that and I thought, you know what, these next 3 months in a footballer's life is probably one of the most important 3 months they're ever going to have. So we're going to be getting into the Great Lock-in for a professional footballer. So let's start off with Phil Foden and his reinvention. Obviously, we know that he went through a phase, man. He went through a season that weren't so great last year. And after the Manchester derby, everyone's talking about Phil Foden is back. But as I said, I don't think it's about him being back. I think it's about Phil Foden's reinvention. And the one thing that I know in football, in other sports and in life, every person goes through a reinvention. It's you have to go from one phase, shredding old and learning how to develop yourself to grow to what's new. And I think Phil Foden's came last season, right? Phil Foden's came last season. We got to remember this guy burst onto the scene at 17 years old. And if we're being honest, every footballer needs to go through a phase of maturity. That's what the reinvention is. The reinvention is going from that inexperienced player where you've built yourself up to become a little bit of a name, and now you are one of the main staples in your team. You are the mature one in your team. No matter how young you may be, maturity is all about experience. And we all know that Phil Foden has had that, right? Phil Foden has had that. And as I said, it's all about how do you go from what's old and into the new. And I think for me, there's a bit of context that people are forgetting here, because Phil Foden is a player that for many seasons now has been one of the most standout players. And we're going on, like, as footballers, we've never ever experienced in our life a bad season or a bad period of time. We all know as players we've had that moment. Every player that has played the game has had a season where they can look at and go, that weren't that great. That weren't my best season, right? We're also forgetting that, like I said, the context that people forget is this guy was number 1 in 23-24. Right? And I always say that there's a saying in football that they say you're only as good as your last season. But sometimes to live this football life, to born and live in this football life, you also need to understand how to actually walk it out. And there's a thing that we all need to understand is about shredding the old to develop ourselves into the new. And when we go through that reinvention phase, we are going through the phase where we are going to have to now develop ourselves to another level. We have to now go from, like I said, inexperience to maturity. We are the experienced one. And another context that people are forgetting is that this guy came through at a time where it was with David Silvas, the Kevin De Bruynes of the world, the Yaya Toures, the Bernardo Silvas, Ilkay Gundogan's. He had these players that he was competing against. Now, don't get me wrong, some of these players are great midfielders. They're not, the greatest of all time, but Kevin De Bruyne certainly is one of them. But these are the players he's had to, come through and be able to get himself in the team. And he's done that. And as he's done that, he then went on this tremendous run of performances that has cemented him as being one of the best English players. Now, yes, he never made the squad with the international duty just gone. However, he's now back. And now we're seeing the Phil Foden that we're used to seeing. Now, here's the thing that I love about this reinvention, because when people go through that phase and they go through that reinvention, a lot of the time, players don't make it out. A lot of players have gone through a season of reinvention and they get stuck in it. And it's reinventing themselves over and over and over and over again. And it's like they don't know how to get through that because they're so used to the limelight that they once had. They're attached to the playing style that they have. They don't evolve their game. They don't change something. And as I said, I think this season last year was Phil Foden's way of changing that. Right. And in order to reinvent yourself, you must go through a period of dark time. You can't grow into something new if you don't go through that period where you are struggling, where you are trying to figure something out, where you're making mistakes and you have to learn those lessons. And so many pundits and so many fans giving their comments. And listen, that's their job. That's a pundit's job, is to make comments. So cool. A fan's job, they're going to be emotional about the game because they love the club. But as a player, you can't look at that. Your perspective has to be from a player's perspective, and you have to ignore those comments and understand that as a footballer, you are going to go through this season of reinvention. And for me, it's just like, growth is something that we're going to have to go through, right? Growth is something that every single one of us are going to have. If you look at the best players in the world, they've all gone through a season of growth. You've seen Cristiano Ronaldo go from Sporting Lisbon to Manchester United. He's then grown in that period. He then goes to Real Madrid. He then grows in that period. We're seeing different phases of him as a player. Messi's went through that season. Lamine Yamal is going to go through that season at some point. He's not going to be the player you're always seeing right now. So many players, I'm telling you, go through that reinvention. Mbappe just came out of a season of reinventing himself. Now we're seeing him be the player we know he can be, but 10 times more. Haaland went through that same phase. It's this season of reinvention. And as I said, man, in order to grow, you must go through hard times. You have to go through a season of hard times to then become the player that you're meant to be. Also in this football week, we got to see Xavi Simons. He made his debut for Tottenham. And for me, he got off to a great start. And when I think of Xavi Simons, there's just one word, well, should I say 2 words that come to mind when I think of him. And the first word is discipline. And the second word is his journey. Right. And I went to go and watch the video of his signing for Tottenham. Well, he spoke a lot about his discipline. He spoke a lot about his dedication. He spoke a lot about his hard work. And it got me thinking about a lot of players talk about discipline a lot of the times. And this is the thing about discipline, is so many people can be disciplined when it's good, and so many people can be disciplined when they go through tough times. But the thing that I find with discipline is the hardest thing when you're in the middle and nothing is happening. When you feel like you are putting in the work, you feel like, you don't feel like you're either doing that great things or you're not doing bad things. It's just you're in that space in the middle, right? I call it the can't rush greatness phase. And that phase, for me, when I think of Xavi Simons, I think of a player like him is someone who I would look at and follow. Because if we look at his journey, and like I said on that interview, he explained his journey, right? A lot of the time, a player's journey is about working their way to the top. We look at a lot of footballers and think they're overnight successes, especially in the case of a Xavi Simons. Xavi Simons came onto the scene at a very young age. He was 13, or maybe 12, 13, 14 when we all heard of him. He was doing shoots with players like Neymar and Nike and all at such a young age. But what really stands out to me is a lot of players work their way to the top, as I just said. You look at Neymar, started off at Santos, then got his move. You look at Cristiano Ronaldo, started off at Sporting Lisbon, then got his move. There are not many players in this football career, in this football life, that have started at the top. Maybe Messi. Maybe we can think about Lionel Messi, and he started at the top and remained at the top. But for most footballers, for Phil Foden as well, for most footballers though, they've worked their way up. Even Kylian Mbappe started off at Monaco and then got his move to PSG, right? And we look at all of these players and we are in awe of their talent, in awe of their ability. But sometimes you got to give your flowers to someone like Xavi Simons, because for me, he is the player that when you hear the word discipline and you want to know what a journey of a footballer is like, and you want to know the toughness that comes with it and the hard work and the dedication that comes with it, Xavi Simons oozes that for me. You got to remember, he started from the top down. Does that make sense? Like I said, the Neymars, they started from here and went up. Xavi Simons started from here. Do you know how hard it is to start from the top? Like, this guy is at Barcelona, and this is when Barcelona was Barcelona. We're talking FC Barca. We're talking like the best midfielders to ever grace the game. We're not just talking about, good players. We're talking about the best midfielders to grace the game. That was his competition. It was the Xavi, Iniesta, Busquets, Fabregas, Thiago Alcantara. These are massive players that he had to fight for. Now, we all looked at Xavi Simons' career from such a young age, and he was one of the highest prospects that we've ever seen. And this guy had to literally take the humbled route. And the reason why I talk about him and I talk about discipline, as I said, it's that can't rush greatness phase. And I feel like when you watch the interview and you hear him discuss his journey, you can tell how he speaks about every transition and every move he has made in his career. And it leads to the conversation also of players managing their careers. And I feel like I've had this conversation with many people who I've mentored before or spoke about, football before and how they should maneuver through their career. And there comes a point in your life where you have to learn to manage your career. You have to learn to manage your life. And Xavi Simons is such a young player. He burst into the scene at such a young age. You got to remember, he's gone through Barcelona to PSG to then move to PSV. And when he speaks about his move to PSV, he spoke about it in a way of that was one of the best moves he's had just due to the fact of first team minutes. He was able to get game time finally. And some people can look at, his career and they can say it was a decline or he came from like maybe he never hit the heights he was supposed to. But sometimes you got to look at it and think maybe the odds were stacked against him already. As I said, a lot of the best players we know and the best players we see, they've all started from the bottom up. You started from the top and really and truly from the top. It's either you maintain it or the only way is down. And I think for somebody who's so young, for somebody who had so much pressure on his back, and he's managed his career the way he did. So he goes to PSV, ends up being able to establish himself, get some games underneath his belt, learn under one of the greats of all times in a striker in Ruud van Nistelrooy. He then moves from there and then goes to Salzburg. At Salzburg, he becomes the player he's supposed to be. And this is what I mean. It's like, and now he's at Tottenham. We're now seeing him in the Premier League. And I use this story because there are a few main parts that I think as players you should take. One, don't look at discipline as just when you're feeling it, and don't look at discipline as when you're going through tough times where you feel like you have to be disciplined. Discipline kicks in when it feels like nothing is happening at all. Nothing is happening at all. You have to make certain decisions in your life. The next part I move on to is the managing your career. This is one young player that's managed his career very well. You imagine being a player with all of that pressure. You imagine being a player who had all the prospects, all the talent and the potential to go to be one of the best players to ever set foot in this game. And there's no opportunity at the club that you're at. So you have to go down. And now you have to, build your way up from there. So managing your career is so important. So important. And he managed his career, and you can tell each move was a phase that a lot of players can take. First phase is the first team minutes, getting those minutes underneath your belt, learning the game, making your mistakes. The next phase and after that is then, okay, cool, how can I now grow and establish myself a bit more as a player? And this is where he's at Salzburg, making his Champions League, debuts and things like that. We then move to now he's at Tottenham, and now he's being able to be on a stage where he can flourish. And it leads me to have the conversation of journeys are built. They're not given. No matter how talented you may be, you are not going to be given a career because of your talent. This kid never had a pathway to play, no matter how talented he was going to be. Speaking about learning the business of a footballer, we have released our own footballer's guide. It's a step-by-step blueprint to building out this football life. If you're an aspiring footballer and you are trying to build the foundation, or you are trying to get to the point where you become a professional footballer, we have this ebook just for you. But most importantly, there's that middle part where all of us struggle. How to find a club, what do we do in the middle of that time, and so much more. And most importantly, just something that holds you accountable. If you guys are interested, make sure you guys click the link in the description below and get your footballer's guide now. So I don't know if you guys have seen across social media this thing called the Great Lock-in of 2025. And essentially it's a challenge where everybody's going to be locking in on the last 3 months of the year. And it got me thinking about, what is it about these last 3 months that a footballer can lock in? And these next 3 months are going to be probably the most important 3 months of a footballer's life. at every single level. We're talking about from academy level to first team level to pro level. We're looking at, team players who are in the lower leagues. Wherever you are, these next 3 months, I'm telling you, you need to lock in. And the reason why is this. It's simple. For academy players, especially you under 18 players, that second year scholarship, I didn't know it at the time when I was going through it. Now I'm out of it. I'm able to see and understand it more, that these coaches were making decisions on your career, your next phase, right? In the timings of October and December. That period of time sets up the next phase of your career. And at the time, I didn't know that, because then when January, February, and everything was approaching, and contracts were being handed out, I was like, well, how was you making this decision? And then you realize, oh, it was the period between October and December. Because when you look at a season, the start is everybody's finding their feet. Everybody's just trying to get comfortable with where they're at. That August, September phase. But by October, you should start to really be kicking into your top performances. That's really where you got the nooks and crannies out, the dust off. You got all of those out, and now we're able to see the player what could be. And that's where coaches are really looking. Coaches, scouts, agents, other clubs. That's where they're looking at you throughout that phase, these next 3 months as a pro footballer. After this, like I said, we've got AFCON, we've got World Cup coming up, but also after January is the phase of football where it starts to heat up. That's where the big competitions are happening, the knockout phases, and all these things are happening for professional footballers. So as a player, you want to be on the minds of your manager to be picked in this phase. If you're in the lower leagues, you're looking at potentially getting a move in a January transfer window. I'm telling you, these next 3 months are going to set up the next phase of your career. And if you don't take it seriously, I'm telling you, you are going to end up wasting it. It potentially could be a make or break, especially some of you players who are in your final year contract, that last year. Again, you are fighting for that next phase of your career. You're fighting to get offered another contract, right? I remember going through it, and I remember seeing it, and some of the things that I will go back, like I start to have this little philosophy of mine that I have at the age I am now, that I wish I could take back then, is what I should have done then, I can do now. And you don't want that on your head, because right now you guys can do it. Every single player at every single phase can do it. This great lock-in is going to require you to sacrifice some things. It's going to require you to say no to certain things. If you're still here, that means you want to take your football career seriously. And every aspiring player needs to build a plan, a blueprint. And that is why we created our Footballer's Guide for players just like you. Head to the link in the description, buy our ebook, and start taking control of your blueprint today. Oh, and one more thing. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and share. Love.